The letter. Noah wrote, "The train hissed to a stop at Brewster Station, and Eliza Ward stepped onto the platform carrying everything she owned in a single carpet bag. She held a letter in her gloved hand, a proposal from Caleb Hart, rancher, widower, father of one. But when their eyes met across the dusty platform, his face held no recognition, no welcome, only confusion that turned slowly to stone. "I never wrote that letter," he said, loud enough for the entire town to hear. The platform fell silent. Every eye turned toward her, waiting for the Eastern woman to crumble. Eliza stood perfectly still and said nothing at all. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop a comment with your city below. I want to see just how far this story travels. And if you're already hooked, hit that like button and stay with me until the very end, because what happens next will change everything. The August sun beat down on Brewster Station with the kind of heat that made men irritable and women retreat indoors. Eliza Ward had been traveling for 6 days, 3 trains, 2 layovers, and more dust than she'd seen in her entire life back in Philadelphia. Her dress was wrinkled, her hair pinned but loose at the edges, and her hands trembled slightly as she stepped down from the passenger car. She was 32 years old, a widow. A woman with no family, no fortune, and no future in a city that had already decided she was past her prime. The letter had arrived 4 months ago, forwarded through a matrimonial service she'd contacted in a moment of desperation. It was written in careful script, measured and honest. "I am not a romantic man," it began, "but I am a decent one. I have land, a home, and a son who needs steadiness. If you are a woman of character who seeks the same, I would be honored to meet you." It was signed Caleb Hart. She'd written back. He'd confirmed. Arrangements were made, and now she stood on a platform in Wyoming territory, scanning the crowd for a man she'd never seen, holding a letter that was apparently a lie. Caleb Hart stood near the station house, hat in hand, his expression carved from granite. He was tall, lean, weathered by sun and work. His shirt was clean but faded, his boots scuffed. He looked like a man who'd forgotten how to smile. Eliza approached slowly, her carpetbag heavy in her hand. "Mr. Hart?" His jaw tightened. "Ma'am, I'm Eliza Ward." She offered the letter. "I believe we've been corresponding." He didn't take it. He didn't move at all. Around them, the platform had gone quiet. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. This was a small town, and spectacle was rare. "I didn't write that," Caleb said quietly. His voice was flat, but there was something underneath it, confusion, maybe anger. "I don't know who did, but it wasn't me." Eliza's stomach dropped. She felt the weight of every eye on her, felt the heat crawling up her neck. But she didn't look away from him. "I see," she said. "I'm sorry you came all this way." He put his hat back on. "I'll pay for your return ticket." It was a kind offer, a gentleman's offer, and it made her feel like a fool. She nodded once. "That won't be necessary." "It is." His tone was firm. "This isn't your fault." "No," she agreed, "but it isn't yours either." Before either of them could say more, a small voice cut through the tension. "Pa, wait." A boy stepped forward from behind Caleb's leg. He was small, maybe 7 or 8, with dark hair that stuck up in the back and eyes that looked too old for his face. He wore patched trousers and a shirt that had been mended more than once. Caleb's expression shifted, just a fraction. "Noah, go wait by the wagon." "No, Pa." The boy's voice was quiet but steady. He looked at Eliza, then back at his father. "I wrote it." The platform went so still that Eliza could hear the wind moving through the dry grass beyond the tracks. Caleb stared down at his son. "What?" "I wrote the letter." Noah's hands were clenched at his sides. "I found the matrimonial paper in the mercantile. I copied your name. I thought—" His voice broke, and he swallowed hard. "I thought maybe if someone came, you'd stop being so sad." Eliza felt something crack open in her chest. She looked at this small boy who'd done something desperate and brave and utterly foolish, and she understood him completely. Caleb crouched down, his face level with Noah's. His voice was low, controlled. "You forged my name. You invited a stranger here under false pretenses. Do you understand what you've done? Yes, sir. Do you understand what this costs her? Noah's eyes filled with tears, but he didn't look away. Yes, sir. Caleb stood slowly. He looked at Eliza, and for the first time she saw past the stone. She saw exhaustion, grief, a man barely holding himself together. I'll pay for your ticket, he said again. And your lodging tonight. The hotel's clean. You can leave tomorrow. Eliza could feel the town watching. She could feel their judgment, their pity, their satisfaction at seeing an outsider brought low. She could leave, she should leave. But she looked at Noah, standing there with tears on his face and hope dying in his eyes, and she made a choice. I'd like to stay. Caleb blinked. Ma'am? Just for a few days. She kept her voice calm, even. I've come a long way. I'd like to see the town before I go back. There's nothing to see. Then it won't take long. A woman in a blue dress stepped forward from the crowd, middle-aged, sharp-eyed, with the air of someone who ran things. Caleb Hart, you can't let a single woman stay in town without a chaperone. It isn't decent. I'll stay at the hotel, Mrs. Brennan, Eliza said smoothly. I'm quite capable of managing myself. That's not the point. Mrs. Brennan's gaze was cold. You came here under false pretenses. The boy may have written the letter, but that doesn't change what it looks like. It looks, Eliza said quietly, like a child who misses his mother. The words landed like a slap. Mrs. Brennan's mouth thinned. The crowd shifted, uncomfortable. Caleb's voice was rough. My wife's been gone 3 years. That's got nothing to do with this. Doesn't it? Eliza met his eyes. Your son wrote to a stranger because he didn't know what else to do. That tells me everything I need to know. You don't know anything about us. No, she agreed, but I know what it's like to be desperate enough to take a chance on a piece of paper. Silence. Then Noah stepped forward again, this time placing himself directly between Eliza and the crowd. His small shoulders were squared, his chin lifted. She stays, he said. His voice was thin but determined. I wrote the letter. I asked her to come. She stays. Caleb closed his eyes briefly, and Eliza saw something break in him, some last wall of resistance. All right, he said finally. He looked at Eliza. You can stay at the house. There's a spare room. It's small, but it's private. Mrs. Brennan made a noise of protest. Caleb, she's not staying at the hotel where every traveler and drifter can bother her. His tone was final. She'll stay with us. Noah asked her here. I'll see it through. He turned and walked toward a wagon hitched near the station house. Noah looked up at Eliza with something like awe, then hurried after his father. Eliza stood alone on the platform, her carpet bag in her hand, and realized she'd just agreed to live in the house of a man who didn't want her, in a town that already despised her, because a lonely child had written a letter in secret. She picked up her bag and followed them to the wagon. The Hart Ranch sat 5 miles outside Brewster, tucked into a valley where the land rolled in long, dry waves. The house was small, 2 stories, wooden, with a porch that sagged slightly on one side. The barn was larger, better maintained. Fences stretched out in neat lines, and a few horses grazed in a corral near the water trough. It was quiet, painfully quiet. Caleb pulled the wagon to a stop and climbed down without a word. Noah scrambled after him, grabbing Eliza's bag before she could protest. I'll show you the room, the boy said quickly. Eliza followed him inside. The house was clean but sparse. A kitchen with a wood stove and a scarred table. A sitting room with 2 chairs and a cold fireplace. Stairs that creaked. Upstairs, Noah opened a door to a small room with a bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the valley. It was Ma's sewing room, Noah said quietly. Pa cleaned it out last year. Eliza set her bag on the bed. It's perfect. Thank you. Noah hesitated in the doorway. Are you really going to stay? For a little while. Why? She turned to look at him. He was so small, so serious. Because I think you were brave to write that letter, and I think you deserve better than watching me leave before we've even talked. His eyes filled again, but he smiled, just a little. Pa's going to be mad for a long time. I expect so. He's not mean. He's just sad. I know. Noah nodded and left, his footsteps light on the stairs. Eliza sat on the edge of the bed and looked out the window at the endless sky. She'd left Philadelphia with nothing. She'd come here expecting a new life, a partnership, maybe even a kind of peace. Instead, she'd found a man made of stone and a boy made of hope. She didn't know what would come next, but she wasn't leaving yet. Dinner was silent. Caleb cooked, beans, cornbread, and coffee so strong it could strip paint. He set plates on the table without looking at her, his movements efficient and distant. Noah sat between them, glancing nervously from one adult to the other. Eliza ate without comment. The food was plain but good. She'd expected worse. "Thank you for the meal," she said when she finished. Caleb nodded once. Noah piped up. "Pa's a good cook. He learned from Ma." "Noah?" Caleb's voice was quiet but firm. The boy fell silent. Eliza folded her napkin. "May I help with the washing up?" "No need." "I'd like to." Caleb finally looked at her, his gaze steady and unreadable. "You're a guest. Guests don't work." "I'm not a guest. I'm a woman who showed up uninvited because your son forged a letter. The least I can do is wash a plate." His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. They worked in silence, Eliza washing, Caleb drying, Noah putting things away. It was strange and awkward and somehow almost normal. When the last dish was put away, Caleb sent Noah upstairs to bed. The boy went reluctantly, looking back at Eliza like he was afraid she'd disappear. Once they were alone, Caleb leaned against the counter and crossed his arms. "You can't stay long." "I know." "People will talk." "They already are." He studied her, his expression hard. "Why did you really come here?" Eliza met his gaze without flinching. "Because I had nowhere else to go." "There's always somewhere else." "Not for a woman my age, with no money and no family." She kept her voice level. "I answered your letter, Noah's letter, because it was honest. Or I thought it was. I didn't come here looking for romance, Mr. Hart. I came looking for a chance." "At what?" "At a life that isn't about surviving day to day. At work that matters. At a place where I'm needed." She paused. "Your son needed someone. That's why he wrote. Maybe you don't want to admit it, but it's true." Caleb's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "My son is my responsibility." "Yes, and he's trying to take care of you." That landed. She saw it hit. Caleb turned away, gripping the edge of the counter. His shoulders were tight, his breathing controlled. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Maybe not," Eliza said quietly. "But I know what loneliness looks like." He didn't respond. She left him there and climbed the stairs to the small room with the window that looked out over the valley. She undressed slowly, washed her face in the basin, and lay down on the narrow bed. Outside, the wind moved through the grass like a whisper. And in the silence of the house, she heard the faint sound of a man's footsteps pacing downstairs, back and forth, until long after midnight. Eliza woke to the sound of a rooster and the smell of coffee. She dressed quickly, pinned her hair, and came downstairs to find Caleb already gone and Noah sitting at the table with a bowl of oatmeal. "Morning," the boy said brightly. "Good morning." She poured herself coffee from the pot on the stove. "Where's your father?" "Out with the horses. He's always up before the sun." Eliza sat across from him. "Do you go to school?" Noah shook his head. "There's no school close enough. Pa teaches me reading and numbers at night. Do you like it?" "It's all right." He stirred his oatmeal. "I like stories better than numbers." "What kind of stories?" "Adventures, cowboys and outlaws and stuff." He looked up at her shyly. "Do you know any stories?" Eliza smiled. "A few." They talked while he ate, about books, about Philadelphia, about the things he wanted to see someday. He was bright, curious, hungry for a world bigger than the one he knew. When Caleb came back in, his sleeves rolled up and his hands dusty, he stopped short at the sight of them talking. "Noah, go check the chicken coop." The boy's face fell, but he obeyed. Caleb poured himself coffee and leaned against the counter, watching her. "You're good with him. He's easy to talk to. He gets attached fast." Eliza met his eyes. "I'm not trying to hurt him." "I know." Caleb's voice was rough. "But you will anyway. When you leave." Maybe, or maybe I'll leave him better than I found him. That's not how it works. Isn't it? She stood, setting her cup in the basin. Your son wrote that letter because he's desperate for something you can't give him. I don't know what that is yet, but I know running from it won't fix it. Caleb's expression darkened. You've been here one day, and I've already seen more than you think. Then you should know this won't end well. Maybe, Eliza said quietly, but I'm still here. She walked outside, leaving him alone with his coffee and his silence. And for the first time in 3 years, Caleb Hart wondered if maybe, just maybe, he'd been wrong about something. The days fell into a rhythm that nobody had planned, but everyone seemed to accept. Eliza rose early, made breakfast while Caleb worked the morning chores, and sat with Noah while he practiced his letters. She mended clothes without being asked, swept floors that didn't need sweeping, and kept herself busy in ways that made her presence useful rather than intrusive. Caleb said little. He worked from dawn until dusk, came in for meals, and retreated to silence. But he watched her when he thought she wasn't looking, careful, assessing glances that told her he was waiting for something to break. On the 4th morning, Eliza found Noah in the barn, struggling to lift a saddle onto a fence rail. Here. She took one side and together they hoisted it up. Noah grinned. Thanks. Pa says I gotta be able to do it myself, but it's heavy. It is, Eliza agreed. But there's no shame in asking for help. Pa never asked for help. I've noticed. The boy leaned against the rail, watching her. Do you like it here? Eliza considered the question. The land was harsh, the work endless, the silence heavy. But there was something about the valley, the way the light moved across the hills, the smell of sage and dust, the bigness of the sky. I do, she said honestly, even though Pa's so quiet. Especially because of that. She brushed straw from her skirt. Quiet men usually have the most to say. They just don't know how to say it yet. Noah frowned. Pa used to talk more, before Ma died. What was she like? The boy's face softened. Pretty. She laughed a lot. She used to sing when she cooked. He kicked at the dirt. I don't remember her voice anymore, just that she sang. Eliza's throat tightened. I'm sorry. It's okay. But his eyes said it wasn't. She wanted to reach for him, to offer comfort, but she didn't know if she had the right. So she just stood there beside him, two people carrying losses they couldn't name, and let the silence hold them both. That afternoon, Mrs. Brennan arrived. Eliza was hanging laundry when the woman's buggy rolled into the yard. Caleb was out checking fences. Noah was inside practicing his arithmetic. Mrs. Brennan climbed down without waiting for assistance, her expression set like mortar. Miss Ward. Mrs. Brennan. Eliza pinned a sheet to the line. What can I do for you? You can tell me what you're still doing here. Eliza reached for another sheet. Mr. Hart offered me lodging. I accepted. For how long? I haven't decided. Mrs. Brennan's mouth thinned. This town has standards. A single woman living under a widower's roof without a chaperone is improper. I'm staying in a separate room. I help with the household. There's nothing improper about it. That's not how it looks. Eliza turned to face her fully. How it looks, Mrs. Brennan, depends entirely on what people choose to see. People see a woman who came here under false pretenses, took advantage of a child's foolishness, and now refuses to leave. Is that what you see? The woman hesitated, just a fraction. It doesn't matter what I see. It matters what the town thinks. The town, Eliza said quietly, seems to spend an awful lot of time thinking about other people's business. This is a small community. Reputation matters. Then perhaps the community should be more concerned with kindness than reputation. Mrs. Brennan's face flushed. You have no idea what you're talking about. I know that a little boy lost his mother and did something desperate to help his father. I know that instead of compassion, he got judgment. And I know that if this town cared half as much about that child as it does about gossip, we wouldn't be having this conversation. The words hung in the air, sharp and clean. Mrs. Brennan opened her mouth, closed it, then turned on her heel and climbed back into her buggy. She snapped the reins harder than necessary, and the horse lurched forward. Eliza watched her go, her hands shaking slightly. She turned back to the laundry and found Caleb standing near the corner of the house. He'd come back without her hearing, and she had no idea how long he'd been there. "She's not wrong," he said. Eliza picked up another sheet. "About which part?" "All of it." He walked closer, his boots crunching on the dry ground. "People are talking. They think you're here to trap me into marriage." "Are you worried I will?" "No." He said it with certainty. "But it doesn't matter what I think. It matters what they think." "Why?" Eliza pinned the sheet with more force than necessary. "Why does it matter so much what strangers think about your life?" "Because I have to live here. Noah has to grow up here. If they decide we're—" He stopped, searching for the word. "Indecent?" "Yes." Eliza turned to face him. "Mr. Hart, I've been called worse things than indecent. I've been called desperate, pathetic, past my prime, and a burden. I came here because I had nothing to lose. If staying here costs you something, tell me now and I'll leave. But don't ask me to leave because you're afraid of gossip." Caleb stared at her, his expression unreadable. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone softer." "I was soft once," Eliza said quietly. "It didn't serve me well." He nodded slowly, as if that made sense to him. Then he turned and walked back toward the barn without another word. That night, Noah asked Eliza to tell him a story. They sat on the porch as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Caleb was inside, reviewing the ranch accounts by lamplight. "What kind of story?" Eliza asked. "A happy one." She thought for a moment, then began. "Once there was a girl who lived in a city made of stone and smoke. She had a small room in a tall building, and every day she looked out her window and wondered if there was a bigger world beyond the streets she knew." Noah leaned forward. "What did she do?" "She saved every penny she earned, and when she had enough, she bought a ticket on a train heading west. She didn't know where she was going or what she'd find. She just knew she couldn't stay where she was." "Was she scared?" "Terrified," Eliza said. "But she went anyway." "What happened to her?" Eliza smiled. "She's still finding out." Noah grinned. "That's you." "Maybe." "Did you really not know Pa didn't write the letter?" "I really didn't." "Are you mad at me?" Eliza looked at him, this small, brave boy who'd taken a chance on a stranger because he didn't know what else to do. "No, Noah, I'm not mad." "But you didn't get what you wanted." "I didn't get what I expected," she corrected. "That's not the same thing." He thought about that. "Do you think Pa will ever want you to stay?" The question was so earnest, so full of hope, that it nearly broke her. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but wanting someone to stay and being ready for them to stay are two different things." "What's the difference?" "One is a feeling, the other is a choice." Noah nodded, as if that made perfect sense, and they sat together in the gathering dark, listening to the crickets and the distant sound of Caleb's pen scratching across paper. The trouble came 5 days later. Eliza was in town, buying flour and sugar at the mercantile, when she overheard two men talking near the counter. "Hart's got himself a live-in woman now," one of them said, his voice carrying. "Guess he's not so particular after all." The other man laughed. "Can't blame him. A man gets lonely." "Lonely's one thing, but moving her in without a ring? That's something else." Eliza set the flour on the counter and turned to face them. Both men went quiet, their faces flushing. "Gentlemen," she said evenly, "if you have something to say about me, I'd appreciate you saying it to my face." The first man, balding, with a thick mustache, cleared his throat. "No offense meant, ma'am." But offense was given. Eliza didn't raise her voice, but her tone was steel. "I'm staying at the Hart Ranch because a child asked me to. I work for my keep. I sleep in my own room, and what happens under that roof is nobody's business but ours." "People talk," the second man muttered. "People always talk," Eliza said. "It's easier than thinking." She paid for her goods, collected her parcels, and walked out. But the damage was done. When she returned to the ranch, Caleb was waiting for her in the yard. His face was tight, his posture rigid. "What happened in town?" She told him. He listened without interrupting, his jaw working. When she finished, he turned away and stared out at the horizon. I'm sorry, Eliza said quietly. For what? For making this harder. You didn't make anything harder. His voice was rough. They were always going to talk. I just thought... He stopped. What? I thought I could keep you separate from it, from them. You can't, Eliza said. Not in a town this small. Caleb turned back to her, his eyes dark. Then maybe you should go. The words hit like a fist. Eliza forced herself to stay calm. Is that what you want? It doesn't matter what I want. It's the only thing that matters. No. He shook his head. What matters is Noah. What matters is keeping him safe, keeping him from being... He broke off, his hands clenching. From being what? Ashamed. Eliza stepped closer. Of who? You? Me? Of all of it. His voice cracked. His mother's gone. His father's barely holding on. And now there's a strange woman living in our house because he forged a letter. What do you think that does to him? I think, Eliza said slowly, it shows him that people can be kind even when the world isn't fair. I think it shows him that mistakes don't have to ruin everything. And I think it shows him that his father is strong enough to choose what's right instead of what's easy. Caleb stared at her, his breathing uneven. You don't know what you're asking. I'm not asking for anything. She held his gaze. I'm just telling you what I see. He looked away, his shoulders sagging. I can't do this. Can't do what? This. You. Any of it. He gestured helplessly. I don't know how. Neither do I, Eliza said. But I'm still here. Before he could respond, Noah came running from the barn, his face pale. Pa, there's men coming. Caleb's head snapped up. How many? 3, maybe 4. Eliza felt her stomach drop. Caleb's expression went cold, controlled. Go inside, he told her. What's happening? Just go. She didn't move. The riders appeared over the hill, 4 men on horseback moving fast. Caleb recognized them immediately. The one in front was Tom Brennan, Mrs. Brennan's husband. Beside him rode 2 ranch hands from a neighboring spread, and the 4th man was someone Eliza didn't recognize. They pulled up hard in the yard, dust rising around them. Tom Brennan dismounted, his face set. Caleb! Tom! Caleb's voice was flat. What's this about? We need to talk about your situation here. My situation's my own business. Not when it affects the town. Brennan gestured to the others. We've got concerns about propriety, about example. I'm not setting any example, Caleb said evenly. I'm living my life. With an unmarried woman under your roof. With a guest who's doing no harm. That's not how people see it. Caleb's jaw tightened. Then people need to mind their own affairs. The 4th man spoke up, a lean man with hard eyes and a badge pinned to his vest. I'm Marshal Coughlin. I've been asked to look into whether there's been any impropriety. Eliza's blood went cold. Caleb didn't move, but his voice dropped. There's been nothing improper. Then you won't mind if I ask the lady a few questions. I mind, Caleb said, but I won't stop you. Coughlin turned to Eliza. Ma'am, are you here of your own free will? I am. And you're staying in Mr. Hart's home without any arrangement? Eliza felt heat rise in her face. I'm staying in a guest room. I help with household work, that's all. She's lying, Brennan said flatly, or covering for him. Caleb took a step forward. Careful, Tom. It's true, isn't it? Brennan's voice rose. You brought her here under false pretenses. Your boy forged a letter, and now she's living here like what? Caleb's voice was quiet, dangerous. Brennan hesitated. Like something she's not. She's a guest, Caleb said, nothing more. Then make it official. Marry her or send her away. The words hung in the air like smoke. Eliza saw Caleb's fists clench, saw the fury in his eyes, saw him holding himself back from violence by sheer force of will. I won't be threatened on my own land, Caleb said. Coughlin held up a hand. Nobody's threatening, but Mr. Brennan has a point. This situation looks bad. If you won't marry her, maybe the lady should move into town. Stay at the hotel. That'd quiet things down. Caleb turned to Eliza. Their eyes met, and in that moment, she saw everything he wasn't saying, the fear, the exhaustion, the weight of trying to protect everyone and failing. She could leave. She should leave. It would solve everything. But Noah was standing in the doorway behind her, watching, and she couldn't let him see her run. "I'll stay at the hotel," she heard herself say. "If it helps." Caleb's expression went blank. "Fine." "Good," Coughlin said. "We'll escort you into town." "That won't be necessary," Eliza said. "I insist." Caleb stepped between them. "You'll leave her alone. I'll take her myself." Brennan looked like he wanted to argue, but Coughlin nodded. "Tomorrow morning. First thing." They mounted up and rode out, leaving a cloud of dust and tension in their wake. Eliza stood frozen, her heart pounding. Noah came out onto the porch, his eyes wide. "Why are you leaving?" "Just for a little while," Eliza said, her voice steadier than she felt. "That's what Ma said." Noah's voice broke. "And she didn't come back." The words shattered something in the air. Caleb turned to his son, his face stricken. "Noah." But the boy was already running, disappearing into the barn. Caleb looked at Eliza, and for the first time she saw him completely undone. "I'm sorry," he said. "Don't be." "This is my fault." "No." She shook her head. "It's the world's fault, but we're the ones who have to live in it." She walked past him, into the house, and began packing her things. That night, Caleb found Noah in the barn loft, curled up in the hay with tears on his face. He climbed up slowly and sat beside his son. For a long time, neither of them spoke. "She's not leaving because of you," Caleb said finally. "Yes, she is." "No, she's leaving because people won't let her stay." He paused. "There's a difference." Noah wiped his eyes. "I thought if she came, you'd be happy again." Caleb felt something crack in his chest. "I know." "Are you mad at me?" "No." He pulled Noah close, feeling the boy's small body shake with sobs. "I'm not mad. I'm just tired." "Of me?" "Of everything." Caleb's voice was rough. "But not you. Never you." They sat together in the dark, and Caleb realized that he'd been trying so hard to protect his son from pain that he'd forgotten how to let him feel anything else. In the house, Eliza lay awake on the narrow bed, listening to the wind and thinking about choices. She could leave tomorrow, go back east, start over somewhere else. But when she closed her eyes, she saw Noah's face, saw the hope dying in his eyes, and she knew that some things mattered more than safety. When morning came, Caleb loaded her bag into the wagon without a word. Noah sat between them, silent and pale. The ride into town was long. The sun climbed higher, turning the air heavy and still. At the hotel, Caleb carried her bag inside and paid for a week in advance. The clerk gave them both a knowing look that made Eliza's skin crawl. Outside, Noah threw his arms around her waist and held on tight. "Don't forget me," he whispered. "Never," she promised. Caleb stood apart, his hat in his hands, his face unreadable. "Thank you," Eliza said, "for everything." He nodded once. Then he climbed into the wagon and they drove away. Eliza stood on the dusty street, watching them go, and wondered if doing the right thing was supposed to feel this much like breaking. The hotel room was clean but lifeless. A bed, a chair, a washstand, and a window that looked out onto the main street. Eliza unpacked her few belongings and sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the sounds of the town below. Wagons rattling past, voices calling to one another, the ordinary noise of people living their ordinary lives. She had never felt more alone. 3 days passed in a fog of sameness. She took her meals in the hotel dining room, enduring the stares and whispers of the other guests. She walked through town with her head high, buying thread and fabric she didn't need just to have something to do. And every evening she sat by the window and watched the road that led out of town, hoping to see a familiar wagon that never came. On the 4th morning, there was a knock at her door. She opened it to find a young woman standing in the hallway, barely 20, with red hair pinned loosely and a basket over her arm. "Miss Ward, I'm Annie Cooper. I work at the mercantile. She held out the basket. I brought you some bread. Fresh this morning. Eliza blinked, caught off guard. That's very kind, but I didn't order any. I know. Annie's smile was tentative but genuine. I just thought you might like it, being new in town and all. Eliza took the basket slowly. Thank you. Annie hesitated. May I come in? Just for a moment? Eliza stepped aside and the girl slipped into the room, glancing nervously at the door as if afraid of being seen. I don't mean to intrude, Annie said quickly, but I wanted you to know that not everyone in town thinks badly of you. Just most of them. Annie winced. It's not personal. People here they're scared of things they don't understand. A woman traveling alone, staying with a widower, it doesn't fit how they think things should be. And how should things be? Safe? Predictable. Annie sat in the chair by the window. My mother died when I was 12. My father raised me and my 3 brothers on his own. People talked then too, said it wasn't proper, said he should remarry or send me to live with relatives. She looked down at her hands. He didn't. He kept us together, and people eventually stopped talking. Eliza sat on the bed. Why are you telling me this? Because I saw what happened in town. When those men came for you, Annie's voice was quiet, and I saw Noah Hart's face when his father drove away. That boy's been carrying the weight of his mother's death for 3 years, and when you came, I saw him smile for the first time since the funeral. Eliza felt her throat tighten. I didn't mean to make things harder for them. You didn't. The town did. Annie stood. I just wanted you to know that some of us see what you did. Staying when you could have left. Helping when you didn't have to. That takes courage. Or foolishness. Maybe both. Annie moved toward the door, then paused. If you need anything, come find me at the mercantile. And don't let them drive you away. She slipped out before Eliza could respond. Eliza sat alone with the bread, still warm from the oven, and for the first time since coming to town, she didn't feel quite so invisible. That afternoon, she was walking past the church when she heard shouting. A group of men had gathered near the town hall. Tom Brennan, Marshall Coughlin, and several others she didn't recognize. And in the center of them stood Caleb, his face like carved stone. Eliza stopped, her heart hammering. You can't just ignore this, Hart, Brennan was saying. The boy forged your name. That's fraud. He's 8 years old, Caleb said evenly. He didn't understand what he was doing. He understood enough to lie. He's a child. That doesn't excuse it. Coughlin stepped forward. Mr. Hart, the law's the law. The boy committed fraud. The woman came here under false pretenses. And you allowed her to stay under your roof without proper oversight. That's 3 violations. Eliza felt ice slide down her spine. She started to move closer, but a hand caught her arm. Annie. She'd appeared out of nowhere, her face pale. Don't, she whispered. You'll only make it worse. They're punishing him for being kind. They're punishing him for breaking the rules. Annie's grip tightened. And if you step in now, they'll use it against both of you. Eliza wanted to scream, wanted to run forward and tell them all exactly what she thought of their rules and their judgment and their cruelty. But she stayed still, because Annie was right. Caleb's voice cut through the argument. What do you want from me? An acknowledgement, Coughlin said. That what happened was wrong, that the boy acted improperly, and that you take full responsibility. I do. Publicly. Caleb's jaw tightened. Fine. And there's the matter of restitution. Brennan's voice was cold. The woman traveled all this way on a false promise. She's entitled to compensation for her trouble. I already paid for her return ticket. That's not enough. She gave up her life in Philadelphia. Lost time, lost wages, lost opportunities. Brennan crossed his arms. You owe her more than a train ticket. Eliza's stomach turned. This wasn't about justice. This was about humiliation. Caleb stood very still. How much? $200. The number hung in the air like a noose. Eliza knew what that meant. $200 was more than most men made in 6 months. It was the price of a horse, a season's worth of supplies, a child's future. I don't have that kind of money, Caleb said quietly. Then you'll work it off, or sell something. Like what? Brennan's smile was thin. I hear you've got a good breeding mare. That'd cover it. Caleb went pale. That horse is valuable. I know. Brennan's tone was almost cheerful, which is why it's fair compensation. Eliza couldn't stay silent any longer. She pulled free from Annie and stepped forward. Stop! Every head turned toward her. Coughlin frowned. Ma'am, this doesn't concern you. It concerns me entirely. Eliza walked straight to Caleb, ignoring the stares. I don't want his money. I don't want his horse. I came here of my own free will, and I stayed of my own choice. He owes me nothing. The law says otherwise, Brennan said. Then the law is wrong. Eliza's voice was steady, cold. You want someone to punish? Punish me. I'm the one who accepted the invitation. I'm the one who stayed when I should have left. Mr. Hart tried to send me away. I refused. That's not what happened, Caleb said sharply. Isn't it? She looked at him. You offered me a return ticket the moment I arrived. You told me I couldn't stay. I insisted. Because I had nowhere else to go. She turned back to Coughlin. If there's been any impropriety, it's mine. Not his, not the boys. Mine. Coughlin studied her, his expression unreadable. You're saying you manipulated the situation? I'm saying I took advantage of a child's kindness and a man's honor. The lies tasted like ash, but she forced them out. If anyone should pay restitution, it's me. You don't have $200, Brennan said flatly. No, but I have time. Eliza lifted her chin. I'll work it off. Whatever needs doing in this town, I'll do it. But you'll leave Mr. Hart and his son alone. Silence fell over the group. Caleb was staring at her like she'd lost her mind. Eliza, don't. It's done. She didn't look at him. Do we have an agreement, Marshal? Coughlin glanced at Brennan, who looked deeply unsatisfied. What kind of work? Whatever you decide is fair, and you'll stay in town, not at the Hart Ranch. Agreed. Coughlin nodded slowly. All right, we'll draw up the terms. He gestured to the others, and they moved toward the town hall, leaving Eliza and Caleb standing alone in the street. Caleb grabbed her arm. What the hell did you just do? What you couldn't. She pulled free. I gave them someone to blame. You just sold yourself into servitude. I bought you your freedom. Her voice shook. You and Noah. That's all that matters. You don't owe me anything. I owe that boy everything. She finally looked at him, and her eyes were fierce. He wrote that letter because he wanted to save you. The least I can do is make sure he doesn't lose you in the process. Caleb looked like he wanted to argue, to rage, to tear the whole situation apart, but his voice came out broken. I can't let you do this. You can't stop me. Eliza stepped back. Go home, Mr. Hart. Take care of your son, and let me do what I came here to do. She turned and walked away before he could see her cry. The terms were drawn up that evening. Eliza would work off her debt through labor, cleaning, cooking, mending, whatever the town required. She would be paid a small wage, most of which would go toward the $200. At the current rate, it would take her nearly 2 years to clear the debt. She signed without hesitation. Annie found her afterward, sitting on the hotel steps in the dark. You're insane, the girl said, sitting beside her. Probably. 2 years. I've survived worse. Annie shook her head. Why would you do this? Eliza didn't answer right away. She watched the stars appearing one by one in the darkening sky and thought about a little boy who'd written a letter in secret because he didn't know how else to ask for help. Because someone had to, she said finally. The work started the next morning. Mrs. Brennan had drawn up a list of tasks that would have broken most women. Eliza was to clean the church, wash linens for the hotel, mend clothes for anyone who asked, and help prepare meals for community events. The wages were minimal, the hours long, and the work backbreaking. Eliza did it all without complaint. She scrubbed floors until her hands bled. She hauled water until her shoulders screamed. She mended torn shirts and patched worn trousers until her eyes burned from the close work by candlelight. And through it all, she kept her head high and her mouth shut. The town watched her with a mixture of suspicion and grudging respect. Some still whispered that she was a schemer, a woman who'd gotten exactly what she deserved. But others, the ones who saw her working dawn to dusk without complaint, began to wonder if maybe they'd been wrong. Annie brought her food when she forgot to eat. The hotel clerk started leaving fresh water in her room without being asked. And one morning, Eliza found a jar of salve for her raw hands sitting outside her door with no note. She never saw Caleb, but Noah came. He appeared one afternoon while she was hanging laundry behind the hotel, his face nervous and hopeful. "Ma'am?" Eliza turned, her heart lurching. "Noah, what are you doing here?" "I wanted to see you." He shifted from foot to foot. "Pa doesn't know I came. You shouldn't be here." "I know, but I had to tell you something." He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "It's my fault. All of it, and you're paying for what I did." "Noah, Pa told me what happened, what you said to the marshal, that you took the blame." His eyes filled with tears. "You shouldn't have done that." Eliza set down the laundry basket and crouched in front of him. "Listen to me. What you did, writing that letter, it wasn't wrong. It was brave. You saw your father hurting, and you tried to help. That's not something to be ashamed of. But you're working like a servant because of me. I'm working because this town needed someone to blame, and I was willing to be that person." She gripped his shoulders gently. "That's not your fault. That's their fault. Pa says you shouldn't have to pay for their mistakes. Your father's right, but the world doesn't work the way it should. Sometimes good people pay for bad rules." She wiped a tear from his cheek. "But I'm all right. I promise." "Are you coming back?" The question broke her. "I don't know. Pa misses you." "Noah, he does. He won't say it, but I can tell. He doesn't talk at all anymore. And at night, I hear him walking around like he can't sleep." Noah's voice was desperate. "Please come back, even if it's just a visit." Eliza pulled him into a hug, holding him tight. "I can't, not yet, but that doesn't mean I don't think about you, both of you." He clung to her, his small body shaking. "I wish I never wrote that letter." "Don't say that." She pulled back, looking him in the eye. "That letter brought me here. And being here, knowing you, that's the best thing that's happened to me in a long time. Don't you dare regret it." He nodded, wiping his eyes. "Now go home before your father worries." Noah hesitated, then kissed her cheek and ran. Eliza stood alone in the alley, watching him disappear around the corner, and let herself cry for the first time since signing the agreement. Weeks passed. The work continued. Eliza's hands grew calloused, her back ached constantly, and exhaustion became a permanent state. But she kept going. One evening, as she was carrying a load of mended clothes back to the mercantile, she heard voices coming from the alley beside the general store. "Can't keep this up forever." She recognized Annie's voice. Eliza paused, not wanting to eavesdrop but unable to move. "She will, though." That was another woman, younger, uncertain. "Have you seen her? She never stops." "Because she doesn't have a choice." Annie sounded angry. Brennan made sure of that. It was legal. Legal doesn't make it right. There was the sound of something being set down hard. "That woman came here looking for a new start, and we turned her into unpaid labor because we couldn't stand the idea that maybe Caleb Hart wasn't as broken as we thought." Silence. Then the other voice, quieter. "What do you mean?" "I mean we liked him better when he was suffering, when he was the tragic widower raising his son alone. It made us feel useful, bringing him casseroles and checking in on the boy." Annie's voice was bitter. "But when someone came along who might actually help, who might make him happy again, we couldn't have that. So we destroyed it." Eliza's chest tightened. "It wasn't just us," the other woman protested. "The law? The law is what we make it, and we made it cruel." Annie's footsteps moved closer to the alley entrance. "I'm ashamed of this town, and I'm ashamed I didn't speak up sooner." Eliza stepped back, not wanting to be caught listening. She hurried to the mercantile, delivered the clothes, and walked back to the hotel in a daze. That night, she sat at the window and stared out at the dark town, thinking about cruelty and kindness and the thin line between them. She thought about leaving, just walking away from the debt, from the town, from all of it. But then she thought about Noah's face, about the hope in his eyes when he'd asked her to come back. And she knew she couldn't leave. Not yet. The breaking point came 6 weeks after the agreement was signed. Eliza was cleaning the church, sweeping, dusting, polishing the pews, when she heard the door open behind her. She turned, expecting to see Reverend Michaels. Instead, she saw Caleb. He stood in the doorway, his hat in his hands, looking like he hadn't slept in days. "Mr. Hart," her voice came out steadier than she felt. "You shouldn't be here." "I know." He stepped inside, closing the door. "I came anyway. If someone sees, I don't care." He walked toward her slowly. "I can't do this anymore." "Do what?" "Watch you destroy yourself for something that wasn't your fault." His voice was rough, strained. "You've been working yourself to death for 6 weeks, for a debt you don't owe, for a crime you didn't commit. I made a choice you shouldn't have had to make." He stopped a few feet away. "Eliza, this has to stop." "It will. In about 18 more months. That's not acceptable." "It's the agreement." "Then I'll break it." His hands clenched on his hat. "I'll go to Coughlin. Tell him the truth. That you lied. That I was the one responsible." "No." The word came out sharp. "You'll do no such thing." "Why not?" "Because they'll punish you." She set down her dustcloth. "And worse, they'll punish Noah. Do you want your son to grow up being known as the boy whose father was publicly shamed? Do you want him carrying that?" "I want him to stop asking me every day when you're coming home." The words landed like a blow. Eliza turned away, her throat tight. "I'm not coming home." "Why not?" "Because there's no home for me there." She forced herself to look at him. "You made that clear when you drove me into town and left me at the hotel." "I did that to protect you." "You did it because it was easier than fighting for me." Caleb flinched. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" Her voice shook. "You had a choice, Caleb. When those men came to your ranch, when they demanded you send me away, you could have told them no. You could have stood your ground, but you didn't. I was trying to keep you safe." "I didn't ask for safe." The words burst out of her loud in the quiet church. "I asked for a chance, a place to belong, and the moment it got difficult, you gave up." "I gave up?" His voice rose to match hers. "I let them humiliate me. I accepted responsibility for something my son did. I stood there and took their judgment because I thought it would spare you. And then you let me take the blame anyway. You didn't give me a choice." "I gave you every choice." Eliza's hands were shaking. "I could have left the moment you told me you didn't write that letter. I could have walked away. But I stayed because I saw a little boy who needed help and a man who was drowning in grief. And I thought," her voice broke, "I thought maybe I could matter. Just a little. Just enough to make staying worth it." "You do matter." "Not enough." She wiped her eyes angrily. "Not enough for you to fight for me when it counted." Caleb stared at her, his face stricken. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing." The word came out flat, final. "I don't want anything anymore." "Eliza, you should go." She turned back to her work, picking up the dustcloth with trembling hands. "Before someone sees you here and adds it to my debt." For a long moment, he didn't move. Then she heard his footsteps, slow and heavy, walking toward the door. He paused at the threshold. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "you mattered enough for me to sell the mare." Eliza's hands went still. "What?" "The mare Brennan wanted. I sold her 3 days after you signed that agreement." His voice was hollow. "I gave the money to Coughlin, told him to apply it to your debt." She turned slowly. "You didn't." "I did. Anonymously. He doesn't know it came from me." Caleb met her eyes. "It won't clear the debt entirely, but it'll cut the time in half." Eliza couldn't breathe. "Why would you do that?" "Because I'm a coward when it comes to standing up in public, but I'm not a coward when it comes to protecting you." He put his hat on. "I'm sorry I made you think otherwise." He left before she could respond. Eliza stood alone in the church, her heart hammering, and realized that everything she thought she knew about Caleb Hart had just shifted. That night, she went to see Marshal Coughlin. He received her in his small office, looking surprised and wary. "Miss Ward, what can I do for you?" "I want to know about the payment made on my debt." Coughlin's expression went carefully blank. "What payment?" "Don't play games with me, Marshal. Someone paid a significant sum toward my debt. I want to know who." "That's confidential." "Is it legal to accept anonymous payments?" "It's unusual, but not illegal." He leaned back in his chair. "Why does it matter?" "Because I want to know if I'm in someone else's debt now." "You're not. The payment was made with no strings attached." He studied her. "Does it bother you that someone helped?" "It bothers me that someone felt they had to." Eliza sat down without being invited. "I made an agreement. I'm honoring it. I don't need charity. Even if it means your freedom comes sooner. Freedom isn't freedom if it's bought by someone else." Coughlin was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled out a ledger and opened it. "The payment cut your debt almost in half. At your current rate of work, you'll be free in 9 months instead of 18. 9 months. It felt like a lifetime and no time at all. "And after that?" Eliza asked. "Am I free to leave?" "You're free to do whatever you want." He closed the ledger. "But between you and me, Miss Ward, I think you've paid enough already." "The town doesn't seem to think so." "The town's starting to change its mind." He met her eyes. "You've worked harder than anyone expected. You haven't complained. You haven't caused trouble. People notice that." "Do they notice that they're wrong?" Coughlin's mouth twitched. "Some do. Others are too stubborn. But give it time. This town's not as hard as it pretends to be." Eliza stood. "Thank you, Marshal." "Miss Ward?" He waited until she looked back. "For what it's worth, I think Hart made a mistake letting you go." She didn't respond. She just walked out into the night, carrying the weight of 9 more months and the knowledge that somewhere in this town, Caleb Hart had sold the thing he loved most to buy her a little bit of freedom. And she didn't know whether to curse him or thank him for it. The next morning brought rain, a steady, cold downpour that turned the streets to mud and drove everyone indoors. Eliza stood at her window and watched water stream down the glass, feeling the chill seep through the walls. She had laundry to wash, floors to scrub, mending waiting in a basket by her bed. The work never stopped, rain or shine. She dressed quickly, pinned her hair, and headed downstairs. The hotel lobby was empty except for the clerk, who nodded at her as she passed. Outside, the rain soaked through her shawl within seconds. She ducked her head and hurried toward the church, where she was supposed to clean the sanctuary before Sunday service. The door was unlocked. She slipped inside, shaking water from her clothes, and stopped. Someone had already been there. The floors were swept, the pews polished. Fresh candles stood in their holders, and the windows had been washed clean. Even the hymnals were stacked neatly, their worn covers aligned. Eliza stood dripping in the doorway, confused and oddly unsettled. "Looking for work?" She spun around. Reverend Michaels stood in the doorway to his office, a slight smile on his weathered face. "I was supposed to clean this morning," Eliza said. "Someone beat you to it. Came before dawn." He walked toward her, his steps slow and measured. Left no name, just did the work and disappeared. "Who?" "I have my suspicions." He studied her with kind, knowing eyes. "But I think you might already know." Eliza's throat tightened. She looked around at the spotless church, at the care evident in every corner, and felt something crack in her chest. "Why would he do this?" she whispered. "Because guilt has a way of making men do things they can't say out loud." Michaels gestured to the pews. "Sit with me a moment?" She hesitated, then nodded. They sat in the front row, the rain drumming on the roof above them. For a long time, neither spoke. "I've known Caleb Hart since he was a boy," Michaels said finally. "Watched him grow up, marry, lose his wife. Watched him turn into stone trying to hold himself together." He paused. "And I watched him start to thaw when you arrived." "That's not what happened." "Isn't it?" The Reverend's voice was gentle. "I saw him the day you came, saw the panic in his eyes when he realized what his son had done. But I also saw the way he looked at you when you refused to crumble under the town's judgment, like he'd forgotten people could be that strong. Eliza stared down at her hands, raw and red from work. He let them send me away. He did, and it's been eating him alive ever since. Michaels leaned back. Some men fight with words, some with fists, and some fight the only way they know how, in silence, in secret, in ways that cost them everything but their pride. That's not enough. No, he agreed, but it's a start. Eliza looked at him. Why are you telling me this? Because I've been a reverend in this town for 30 years, and I've seen what happens when good people let fear make their decisions. I've seen marriages destroyed, families broken, lives wasted, all because someone was too afraid to fight for what mattered. His eyes were sad. I don't want to see it happen again. What do you expect me to do? I expect you to make your own choice. Not the one the town wants, not the one Caleb wants. Yours. He stood slowly. But I hope you'll remember that forgiveness isn't weakness, and that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is give someone another chance. He walked back to his office, leaving Eliza alone in the clean, quiet church. She sat there for a long time, listening to the rain and thinking about chances and choices and the difference between them. The days that followed fell into a strange new pattern. Eliza would arrive at her assigned tasks to find half the work already done. Floors swept, water hauled, firewood stacked, always before dawn, always anonymous. But she knew. The town began to notice too. Annie mentioned it one afternoon while Eliza was mending shirts at the mercantile. Someone's been helping you, the girl said, her tone carefully neutral. So it seems. People are talking. People are always talking, Annie smiled. True, but this time they're saying maybe Caleb Hart isn't as cold as they thought. Eliza's hand stilled on the fabric. They know it's him? They suspect. Nobody's seen him, but who else would it be? Annie leaned closer. Mrs. Brennan's furious. She thinks it undermines the whole point of the agreement. The point was punishment. Exactly. And if someone's easing the punishment, it means the town's judgment meant nothing. Annie's eyes sparkled. I think it's wonderful. Eliza didn't know what to think. Part of her was angry that Caleb thought he could fix things with secret gestures and anonymous help. Part of her was touched that he was trying at all. And part of her, the part she tried hard to ignore, wanted to see him, to talk to him, to understand what he was thinking. But he never showed himself. He was a ghost, helping in silence, and it drove her quietly mad. 3 weeks after the church incident, Eliza was walking back to the hotel after delivering mended clothes when she heard shouting. A crowd had gathered near the town hall. She hurried closer and saw Marshal Coughlin standing on the steps, his face grim. Beside him stood a man Eliza had never seen before, tall, expensively dressed, with the kind of face that expected obedience. Under legal authority, the stranger was saying, his voice carrying over the crowd. The woman is bound by contract, and I've come to collect. Eliza's blood went cold. She pushed through the crowd, her heart hammering. What's going on? She demanded. Coughlin turned to her, and his expression was apologetic. Miss Ward, this is Mr. Edmund Price. He claims to be your former employer. Eliza stared at the man, and recognition slammed into her like a fist. Edmund Price, the Philadelphia lawyer she'd worked for as a housekeeper before answering the matrimonial advertisement. The man who'd promised her wages and security and delivered neither. Miss Ward. Price's smile was cold. How unexpected to find you here. What do you want? Her voice was steadier than she felt. What I'm owed. You left Philadelphia without notice, without fulfilling the terms of your employment contract. That constitutes breach of agreement. I gave you 3 months' notice, which I did not accept. He produced a sheaf of papers from his coat. According to the contract you signed, you were obligated to provide 6 months' notice or pay a penalty of $100. You did neither. The crowd murmured. Eliza felt the ground tilt beneath her. I don't have $100. So I've been informed, which is why I've come to offer an alternative. Price's smile widened. You'll return with me to Philadelphia and work off the debt. At your previous wages, that should take approximately 1 year. No, The word came out flat and hard. It's not a request, Miss Ward. It's a legal obligation. She's already working off a debt here, Coughlin interjected. She can't leave until it's settled. Then I'll purchase her debt from the town. Price looked around at the crowd. How much does she owe? Coughlin hesitated. About $120? I'll pay it, in full. Today. Price pulled out a bank draft. And in exchange, Miss Ward will accompany me back to Philadelphia to fulfill her original contract. The crowd erupted in whispers. Eliza stood frozen, her mind racing. This couldn't be happening. She couldn't go back to Philadelphia, back to that house, that man, that life of servitude and silence. I won't go, she said. You don't have a choice. She does if she's married. Every head turned. Caleb stood at the edge of the crowd, his hat in his hands, his face set like stone. Price frowned. Excuse me? Caleb walked forward, his boots heavy on the packed dirt. A woman's employment contract is void if she marries. It's the law. Miss Ward isn't married. Not yet. Caleb stopped in front of Eliza, and his eyes met hers. But she will be, if she'll have me. The world went silent. Eliza stared at him, unable to breathe, unable to think. Around them, the crowd pressed closer, waiting. Mr. Hart, she said carefully, what are you doing? Something I should have done weeks ago. His voice was quiet but steady. I'm asking you to marry me. You don't mean that. I do. You're only saying it because of him. She gestured to Price. Because you feel obligated. I'm saying it because I'm tired of being a coward. Caleb's jaw tightened. I let you take the blame for something that wasn't your fault. I let them turn you into a servant because I was afraid of what people would think, and I've spent every day since trying to make up for it in ways that don't cost me anything. He paused. I'm done hiding. If you'll marry me, I'll stand up in front of this entire town and claim you, not out of duty, not out of guilt, but because I choose you. Eliza's eyes burned. You don't know what you're asking. Yes, I do. His voice gentled. I'm asking you to take a chance on a man who's made every mistake possible, who's let you down, who doesn't deserve you, but who's willing to spend the rest of his life trying to be worthy of you. Caleb, if you say no, I'll understand, and I'll find another way to stop this man from taking you. But if you say yes, he held out his hand. If you say yes, we'll face whatever comes next together. The crowd waited. Price looked furious. Coughlin watched with something like hope in his eyes, and Eliza looked at Caleb's outstretched hand and thought about all the reasons she should say no. The practical ones, the safe ones, the ones that made sense. Then she thought about Noah, about the ranch, about the way Caleb had sold his mare to buy her freedom, about the way he'd cleaned the church in secret, hauled water before dawn, done 100 small things that cost him everything and gave him nothing but the knowledge that he'd helped. She thought about the man he'd been and the man he was trying to become, and she put her hand in his. Yes. The word was barely a whisper, but it shattered the silence like thunder. Caleb's fingers closed around hers, strong and sure. He looked at Coughlin. We need a reverend. I'm already here. Michael stepped forward from the crowd, a slight smile on his face. Shall we proceed? Price surged forward. This is absurd. You can't just marry her to avoid a legal obligation. Actually, Coughlin said mildly, he can. Marriage nullifies employment contracts. It's settled law. Then I'll challenge it. I'll take this to a judge. You can try. Michael's voice was calm but firm. But by the time you find a judge willing to hear the case, they'll already be married, and no judge in this territory will force a woman to leave her husband to fulfill an old employment contract. Price's face went red. This is fraud. This, Caleb said quietly, is a man protecting the woman he loves. If you have a problem with that, take it up with me. The two men stared at each other. Price was taller, better dressed, wealthier, but Caleb had something Price didn't, the weight of a man who'd finally stopped running. Price looked away first. This isn't over, he muttered. But he turned and pushed through the crowd, his shoulders tight with fury. When he was gone, Michaels gestured to the church steps. Shall we? The crowd followed, buzzing with excitement and shock. Eliza let Caleb lead her up the steps, her hand still in his, her heart racing so fast she thought it might burst. At the top, Michaels turned to face them. "This is highly irregular," he said. "But then again, so is everything about your situation." He looked at Caleb. "Are you certain about this?" "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." Michaels turned to Eliza. "And you?" She looked at Caleb, really looked at him, saw the fear in his eyes, the determination, the hope. "Yes," she said, "I'm certain." "Then let's make this official before anyone changes their mind." The ceremony was short, simple, and witnessed by half the town. Michael spoke the words quickly, barely giving either of them time to think. Caleb repeated the vows in a voice that shook just slightly. Eliza's voice was clearer, stronger, carrying over the whispers of the crowd. When Michaels asked for the ring, Caleb hesitated. "I don't have—" Annie pushed forward, pulling a thin silver band from her own finger. "Here, use this. You can replace it later." Caleb took it with a grateful nod and slipped it onto Eliza's hand. It was too large, but she closed her fingers around it and held tight. "By the authority vested in me," Michael said, "I pronounce you husband and wife." He didn't tell Caleb to kiss the bride. The moment was too raw, too public, too strange for that kind of tradition. But Caleb lifted Eliza's hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles, a gesture so gentle it made her throat ache. The crowd erupted in uncertain applause. Some were smiling, some were frowning. Mrs. Brennan looked like she'd swallowed glass. Eliza stood on the church steps, married to a man she barely knew, wearing a borrowed ring and a work-worn dress, and felt more seen than she'd ever felt in her life. Caleb turned to Coughlin. "The debt. Now that we're married, it's void," the marshal confirmed. "Marriage transfers financial responsibility. Any debt she owed becomes yours. And since you're the one who paid most of it already," he shrugged, "consider it settled." Caleb's shoulders sagged with relief. Annie stepped forward and hugged Eliza fiercely. "Welcome to the family, Mrs. Hart." The name hit Eliza like a wave. Mrs. Hart. She was married. She had a husband, a home, a family. She looked at Caleb, and he was watching her with something like wonder in his eyes. "We should go," he said quietly, "before someone decides to object." He helped her into his wagon, which was parked near the church. The crowd watched them go, still murmuring, still uncertain. As they drove out of town, Eliza finally let herself breathe. "That really just happened," she said. "It did. We're married." "We are." Caleb kept his eyes on the road. "Are you going to regret it?" "I don't know yet." "Are you?" "No." He said it without hesitation. "But I need you to know something." "What?" He pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to face her. "I didn't ask you to marry me just to save you from that man. I asked because I've been thinking about it for weeks. Since before you moved to the hotel. Since the day you stood on my porch and told me I was afraid of gossip. Caleb, I don't expect you to love me. I don't even expect you to like me much right now. But I need you to know that this isn't just convenience. It's not just guilt. I want you in my life, in Noah's life. I want you to be part of our family." He paused. "If you'll let me prove it to you." Eliza looked at him, this hard, quiet man who'd finally found his voice at the moment it mattered most. "You sold your mare for me," she said. He nodded. "I did." "Why?" "Because you were suffering, and I couldn't stand it." His voice was rough. "Because you mattered more than a horse, more than pride, more than what anyone thought. You should have told me." "I know, but I didn't know how." He looked down at his hands. "I'm not good with words. I'm better with action, but I'm trying to learn." Eliza reached over and took his hand. "Then teach me too, because I don't know how to be a wife. I don't know how to be a mother. I don't even know if I belong on a ranch in the middle of nowhere." "You belong wherever you choose to be." Caleb's fingers tightened around hers. "And if you choose to be with us, I'll spend every day making sure you know you made the right choice." She looked at their joined hands, his rough and scarred from work, hers red and raw from servitude, and thought about all the ways two broken people could build something whole. "Take me home," she said. The words felt like a promise. Caleb drove them back to the ranch in silence. But it wasn't the heavy silence of before. It was quieter, softer, full of possibility. When they arrived, Noah was sitting on the porch steps, kicking at the dirt. He looked up as the wagon approached, and his face lit up like the sun. "Eliza!" He ran toward them before Caleb had even stopped the wagon. Eliza climbed down and caught him as he threw himself into her arms. "You're back. You're really back." "I'm back," she said, her voice thick. "For how long?" She looked over his head at Caleb, who was climbing down from the wagon with a small smile on his face. "For good," she said. "If that's all right with you." Noah pulled back, his eyes wide. "Really? Really? Your father and I—" She hesitated, not sure how to explain. "We got married." The boy's mouth fell open. He looked from Eliza to Caleb and back again. "You did?" "We did," Caleb confirmed, "which means Eliza's going to live here, with us, permanently." For a moment, Noah just stared. Then he let out a whoop of joy so loud it startled the horses. "I knew it! I knew you'd come back. I knew Pa would fix it." He danced around them, laughing. "Wait till I tell everyone at church." "Maybe wait a bit on that," Caleb said dryly. "Give people time to adjust." But Noah was already running toward the barn, shouting about how he needed to clean out the spare room and make it nice for Eliza, even though she'd stayed there before. Eliza watched him go, her heart full to bursting. "He's happy," she said. "He's been miserable since you left." Caleb stood beside her, close but not touching. "We both have been." She turned to look at him. "What happens now?" "Now we figure it out, day by day." He paused. "I know this isn't what you expected when you came here. I know it's not a real marriage. Not yet. But, Caleb," she stopped him, "it's real enough. And the rest, we'll find it as we go." He nodded slowly. "The spare room is yours, for as long as you want it. No pressure, no expectations." "Thank you." They stood together in the yard, the sun sinking low on the horizon, painting everything gold. From the barn came the sound of Noah singing, off-key and joyful, and it was the most beautiful sound Eliza had ever heard. That night, after a simple dinner and Noah's endless questions about the wedding, Eliza climbed the stairs to the small room that had once been a sewing room and was now hers again. The bed was made with fresh linens. A vase of wildflowers sat on the washstand, and on the pillow lay a folded piece of paper. She picked it up and unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was Noah's, careful, deliberate, each letter formed with concentration. "Dear Eliza, welcome home, love. Noah, P.S. Pa says he's sorry for everything. I think he means it." Eliza sat on the edge of the bed, holding the note, and let herself cry for the third time since arriving in this strange, hard, beautiful place. But this time, she was crying because she was happy. Downstairs, Caleb stood at the window, looking out at the dark valley. Noah had finally gone to bed, exhausted from excitement. The house was quiet. He heard footsteps on the stairs and turned to see Eliza in the doorway, the note in her hand. "Thank you," she said. "For the flowers." Noah picked them. "And the note?" "Also Noah." He paused. "But the sentiment's mine." She walked into the room and stood beside him at the window. "I read it." And I think you do mean it." She looked up at him. "So I'm going to give you a chance to prove it." Caleb's throat tightened. "I won't let you down." "You might. We both might." She smiled slightly. "But we'll figure it out together." They stood side by side, looking out at the land that stretched endlessly under the stars, and Eliza thought that maybe, just maybe, this was what coming home felt like. The first morning of her marriage, Eliza woke to the sound of roosters and the smell of coffee drifting up from the kitchen. She lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, letting the reality settle over her like a blanket. She was married. She lived here now. This was her home. The words still felt strange in her mouth. She dressed quickly and came downstairs to find Caleb already at the stove, frying eggs in a cast-iron skillet. Noah sat at the table, swinging his legs and grinning at her like she'd hung the moon. Morning, Ma, he said. Eliza stopped in the doorway. The word hit her square in the chest. Caleb turned from the stove, his expression uncertain. Noah, we talked about this. You need to ask Eliza what she wants to be called. It's all right, Eliza said quietly. She walked to the table and sat across from Noah. You can call me whatever feels right to you. Ma feels right, the boy said seriously. If that's okay. Eliza's throat tightened. It's more than okay. Noah's smile could have lit the whole valley. Breakfast was simple, eggs, bread, coffee, but it felt like a feast. They ate together, the three of them, and for the first time since arriving in Wyoming, Eliza felt like she was exactly where she belonged. After breakfast, Caleb stood and cleared his throat. I've got work to do. Fences need mending on the north pasture. I'll be back around noon. Can I come? Noah asked eagerly. Not today. I need you to stay here. Help Eliza settle in. The boy's face fell slightly, but he nodded. When Caleb had gone, Noah turned to Eliza with barely contained excitement. Want to see the chickens? I've been taking care of them all by myself. She smiled. I'd love to. They spent the morning together, Noah showing her every corner of the ranch with pride. The chicken coop where he collected eggs each morning, the barn where the horses were kept, each one introduced by name and temperament, the small vegetable garden behind the house that had been neglected but could be revived with work. Ma used to grow tomatoes, Noah said, kneeling beside a patch of weeds, and beans, and these yellow flowers she really liked. Marigolds. Maybe, I don't remember. He looked up at her. Do you know how to garden? A little. My mother had a small plot in the city, nothing like this, but I learned some things. Could we fix it? Make it nice again? Eliza looked at the overgrown patch, seeing past the weeds to what it could be. I think we could. Noah's face lit up, and they spent the next hour pulling weeds and talking about what they might plant come spring. It was hot work, dirty work, but it felt good to use her hands for something that would grow instead of something that would just be undone the next day. When Caleb returned at noon, he found them both covered in dirt, laughing over a stubborn root that wouldn't come loose. He stood watching them for a moment, something unreadable in his expression. Then Noah spotted him and waved. Pa, come help, this one's stuck. Caleb walked over, knelt down, and with one strong pull, freed the root from the earth. Noah cheered. Eliza sat back on her heels, pushing hair from her face, and caught Caleb looking at her with an expression that made her breath catch. Thank you, she said. It's just a root. I meant for letting us do this, for not minding that we're changing things. Caleb was quiet for a moment. It's your home now. Change whatever you want. The words were simple, but they carried weight. That night, after Noah had gone to bed, Eliza and Caleb sat on the porch in the cooling dark. The silence between them was comfortable now, broken only by the sound of crickets and the occasional shift of horses in the barn. I've been thinking, Caleb said finally, about the town, about what happened. What about it? People are going to talk about us getting married so fast, about why. He paused. I want you to be prepared for that. I've been talked about before. I'll survive. I know you will, but I don't want you to have to. He turned to look at her. I want to make this right, really right. Not just legally, but in every way that matters. Eliza met his gaze. What are you saying? I'm saying I want this to be a real marriage, eventually, when you're ready. His voice was low, careful. I'm not asking for anything now. I know we barely know each other, but I want you to know that's what I'm hoping for, a real partnership, a real family. Her heart hammered. Caleb, you don't have to answer now. I just wanted you to know where I stand. He stood, picking up his hat. I'll say goodnight. He went inside, leaving Eliza alone with the stars and a feeling in her chest she couldn't quite name. The days turned into weeks, and a rhythm emerged. Caleb worked the ranch, teaching Eliza the routines as she learned them. How to read the weather, how to tell when a horse was favoring a leg, how to mend a fence so it would hold through winter. She proved a quick study, her hands becoming as capable with leather and wire as they'd been with needle and thread. Noah thrived with Eliza there. His laughter came easier, his smiles more frequent. He followed her around like a shadow, helping with chores and asking endless questions about everything from why the sky was blue to what Philadelphia had been like. And slowly, carefully, Eliza and Caleb began to know each other. She learned that he was a man of few words but deep feeling, that he woke before dawn every day and stood on the porch for 10 minutes, just watching the sunrise, that he'd built most of the ranch buildings himself, with his father and brother, before they'd moved on to Montana, that his wife Sarah had died of fever, sudden and brutal, leaving him hollowed out and unsure how to be both father and mother to a 5-year-old boy. He learned that Eliza had been married before, briefly, to a man who died in a factory accident 6 months after their wedding, that she'd worked herself half to death trying to survive in Philadelphia, taking any job she could find, that she'd answered the matrimonial advertisement not out of desperation for marriage, but out of hunger for a life that meant something beyond mere survival. They talked in the evenings after Noah went to bed, their conversations growing longer and deeper as the weeks passed. And sometimes they didn't talk at all, just sat together in companionable silence, and that was enough. 6 weeks after the wedding, a letter arrived. Caleb brought it in from town, his face tight. He handed it to Eliza without a word. She recognized the handwriting immediately. Edmund Price. Her hands shook as she opened it. The letter was brief and venomous. Price wrote that he would not accept her marriage as legitimate grounds to void their contract. He'd hired a lawyer and would be pursuing legal action. He demanded she return to Philadelphia to settle the matter in court, or he would seek a warrant for her arrest on charges of fraud and breach of contract. Eliza read it twice, her stomach churning. Then she handed it to Caleb. He read it slowly, his jaw tightening with each line. When he finished, he folded it carefully and set it on the table. "He can't do this," Eliza said. "Can he?" "He can try." Caleb's voice was flat. "Whether he'll succeed is another matter." "What do we do?" "We fight." He looked at her. "Together." The words settled something in her chest. They rode into town the next morning and went straight to Marshal Coughlin's office. He listened as they explained the situation, his expression growing darker with each detail. "Price is grasping at straws," Coughlin said when they finished. "Marriage voids employment contracts. That's established law. But he might be able to make enough noise that a judge agrees to hear it." "And if that happens," Eliza asked, "then we get a lawyer of our own and fight it properly." He leaned back in his chair. "But that takes money. And time." Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "How much?" "For a good lawyer, could be as much as $300. Eliza's heart sank. That was more than they had, more than they could afford. But Caleb just nodded. "I'll find it." "Caleb, no, I said I'd fight for you." His voice was firm. "I meant it." They left Coughlin's office and walked toward the mercantile to pick up supplies. On the way, they passed Mrs. Brennan coming out of the general store. She stopped when she saw them, her expression pinched. "Mrs. Hart," she said stiffly. It was the first time anyone had called Eliza by her married name in public. It felt like both an acknowledgement and a challenge. "Mrs. Brennan," Eliza replied evenly. The woman looked like she wanted to say something cutting, but Caleb's presence beside Eliza seemed to hold her back. Instead, she just sniffed and walked past. Inside the mercantile, Annie greeted them with a warm smile. "How are you settling in, Mrs. Hart?" "Well, thank you." Annie leaned closer, lowering her voice. "I heard about Price, about the letter." Eliza shouldn't have been surprised. In a town this small, news traveled faster than horses. "We're handling it," she said. "If you need help, money or testimony or anything, you let me know. There's more people in this town who support you than you might think." Annie glanced at Caleb. "Both of you." It was a small kindness, but it meant everything. That night, Eliza couldn't sleep. She lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about lawyers and money and the possibility of being dragged back to Philadelphia in chains. The fear was cold and relentless. She heard footsteps in the hallway and then a soft knock. "Eliza?" Caleb's voice was quiet. "Are you awake?" "Yes." "Can I come in?" She sat up. "All right." He opened the door but stayed in the hallway, respecting the boundary of her space. "I heard you moving around, thought you might be worried." "I am." Me too. He leaned against the doorframe. But I want you to know something. Whatever happens with Price, whatever he tries, I won't let him take you. I'll sell every acre of this ranch if I have to. I'll fight him in every court in the territory, but you're not going back there. Eliza's eyes burned. You can't promise that. Yes, I can. Because I'm not the man I was 2 months ago. The man who let you take the blame, who let you work yourself to exhaustion, who was too afraid to stand up in public. He paused. You changed me, and I won't go back to being that man. Not ever. She stood and walked to him, stopping just inside the doorway. They were close enough to touch, but neither moved. I'm scared, she admitted. So am I. His voice was rough. But we'll face it together. That's what marriage means. Real marriage. The kind I'm asking you to build with me. Eliza looked up at him, at this hard, quiet man who'd finally learned to speak his heart and made a choice. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. For a moment, Caleb stood frozen. Then his arms came around her, holding her close, and she felt him shaking. They stood like that for a long time, two broken people holding each other up, and when they finally pulled apart, something had shifted between them. Something that felt like the beginning of real trust. The lawyer arrived 2 weeks later, a sharp-eyed man named Garrett, who'd been recommended by Marshal Coughlin. He reviewed the case, asked pointed questions, and delivered his assessment with brutal honesty. Price has a weak case, but he's got money and connections. He could drag this out for months, maybe years, and even if you win, the legal fees could bankrupt you. Caleb's face was stone. What do you recommend? Settle. Offer him something to make him go away. Like what? Money. Not the full 100 he's claiming, but enough to satisfy his pride. Say $50 and a formal apology. No. Eliza's voice was sharp. I won't apologize to that man for leaving a situation where I was underpaid and overworked. Garrett looked at her with something like respect. Then we go to court. But you need to understand what you're risking. Your home, your marriage, your freedom. I understand. Caleb reached over and took her hand. We fight. Garrett nodded slowly. All right, then let's fight smart. The trial was set for 6 weeks later, in the territorial court 2 towns over. In the meantime, Garrett worked tirelessly, gathering evidence, interviewing witnesses, building their defense. He discovered that Price had a history of exploiting his household staff, underpaying them, and then claiming breach of contract when they left. 3 other women had fled his employment under similar circumstances. None had been willing to testify before, fearing retribution. But when Garrett explained that Eliza was willing to stand up to Price in court, 2 of the women agreed to come forward. Their testimony would be devastating. The night before they were set to leave for the trial, Eliza stood in the garden she'd been slowly bringing back to life. The late autumn air was crisp, and the first frost had touched the edges of the plants. But there were still a few hardy flowers blooming, marigolds, just like Noah had remembered. Caleb found her there, her shawl wrapped tight against the cold. You should be resting, he said. I can't. I keep thinking about tomorrow. He stood beside her, looking out at the darkening valley. Whatever happens, we'll be all right. How can you be sure? Because I've already lost everything once, and I survived. He turned to her. But I'm not planning to lose this time. Eliza looked at him. I need to tell you something. All right. When I first came here, I was looking for safety, for a place to hide from a world that had been cruel to me. She paused. But somewhere along the way, this stopped being about safety. It became about belonging, about family, about you and Noah and this life we're building. Caleb's expression softened. Eliza, I'm not finished. She took a breath. I know this marriage started as a convenience, a way to save me from Price, but I don't want it to stay that way. I want it to be real. Not someday, now. He stared at her, and in the fading light she saw hope and fear and love all tangled together. Are you sure? His voice was barely a whisper. I've never been more sure of anything. Caleb reached for her, his hands gentle on her face. I love you. I think I've loved you since the day you refused to leave when anyone else would have run. I love you too, she said. Even when you're stubborn and silent and impossible. He smiled, really smiled, and it transformed his whole face. Then he kissed her, soft and careful, like she was something precious he was afraid to break. When they pulled apart, the stars were coming out overhead, and the world felt full of possibility. The trial lasted 3 days. Price's lawyer was smooth and confident, painting Eliza as a woman who'd abandoned her obligations and manipulated a grieving widower into marriage to avoid consequences. He called her ungrateful, opportunistic, and deceitful. Garrett dismantled him piece by piece. He presented the 2 women who'd worked for Price before Eliza, both of whom testified about underpayment, excessive work hours, and Price's habit of threatening legal action when they tried to leave. He presented documentation showing that Eliza had given proper notice, which Price had simply refused to acknowledge. He presented character witnesses from Brewster, including Annie, Reverend Michaels, and even Marshall Coughlin, who testified to Eliza's integrity and work ethic. And then he called Caleb to the stand. Caleb spoke plainly and honestly about how Eliza had come into his life, how she'd stayed when she could have left, how she'd taken blame that wasn't hers to protect him and his son. He spoke about the marriage, not as a legal maneuver, but as a choice they'd both made because they wanted to build a life together. "I'm not a man who speaks easy," Caleb said, "but I know what I feel, and I know that my wife is the strongest, bravest person I've ever met. If Mr. Price thinks she's going to crumble under his threats, he doesn't know her at all." The courtroom was silent when he finished. Price took the stand in his own defense, confident and condescending. But under Garrett's cross-examination, he grew flustered and defensive. He contradicted himself. He revealed the depth of his arrogance and his sense of entitlement. By the time he stepped down, the judge was looking at him with barely concealed disgust. The verdict came on the afternoon of the 3rd day. The judge ruled that Eliza had fulfilled her obligations, that Price's contract was exploitative and unenforceable, and that the marriage was legitimate in every legal sense. He dismissed all charges and ordered Price to pay court costs. Price stormed out of the courtroom without a word, his lawyer hurrying after him. Eliza stood frozen, barely able to believe it was over. Caleb pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "It's done. You're free." She clung to him, shaking with relief and exhaustion and overwhelming gratitude. Outside the courthouse, Garrett shook their hands and refused additional payment beyond what they'd already given him. "You've paid enough," he said simply. "Go home. Be happy." They rode back to Brewster in the wagon, Eliza leaning against Caleb's shoulder, watching the landscape roll past. The sky was enormous, the air cold and clean. It felt like breathing for the first time in months. When they reached the ranch, Noah came running out of the house, practically vibrating with excitement. "Did you win? Did you?" "We won," Eliza said, climbing down from the wagon. Noah threw himself at her, laughing and crying at the same time. "I knew you would. I knew it." That night they celebrated with a simple meal, nothing fancy, just stew and bread and apple pie that Eliza had made before leaving for the trial. But it tasted like victory. After Noah went to bed, Caleb took Eliza's hand and led her upstairs. Not to the small spare room she'd been sleeping in, but to the larger room at the end of the hall. His room. Their room now. He'd cleaned it, put fresh linens on the bed, and placed a vase of dried flowers on the dresser, marigolds from the garden. "I thought," he said quietly, "if you were ready." "I'm ready," Eliza said. They stood together in the lamplight, and for the first time since Sarah had died, Caleb felt like he was truly alive again. The winter came cold and hard, but the Hart Ranch was ready. Caleb and Eliza worked side by side, preparing for the season, stocking firewood, insulating the barn, preserving food. Noah helped with everything, his cheerful chatter filling the house with warmth, even on the coldest days. In town, the whispers gradually shifted. People saw the way Caleb and Eliza worked together, the way they looked at each other, the way Noah flourished under Eliza's care. What had begun as scandal slowly transformed into something else, a story of second chances and unexpected grace. Mrs. Brennan never apologized, but she stopped making pointed comments. Marshall Coughlin tipped his hat to Eliza whenever they passed on the street, and Annie became a regular visitor to the ranch, bringing news and laughter and friendship. One evening in late December, as snow fell softly outside, Eliza sat by the fire with a piece of paper and a pen. Noah was already asleep upstairs, and Caleb was checking on the horses one last time before bed. She wrote carefully, her handwriting neat and measured. Dear Mother and Father, I know it's been a long time since I've written. I wanted you to know that I'm well. I'm married now to a good man named Caleb Hart. We have a son, not by birth, but by choice, and he's become as much mine as if I'd carried him myself. We have a ranch in Wyoming Territory, and while the work is hard, it's honest. I'm happier than I've been in years. Perhaps happier than I've ever been. I hope you're well, and I hope someday you might come visit and see this life I've built. With love, Eliza. She sealed the letter just as Caleb came back inside, stamping snow from his boots. Writing to Philadelphia, he asked. To my parents. I thought they should know I'm all right. He hung his coat by the door and came to sit beside her. Are you? All right? She looked around at the small, warm house, at the fire crackling in the hearth, at the man beside her who'd learned to fight for what mattered. Yes, she said, I really am. Caleb pulled her close, and they sat together watching the fire, listening to the wind outside, feeling the quiet peace of two people who'd found their way home. Upstairs, Noah slept soundly, dreaming of spring and gardens and a family that was whole again. And in the morning, when the sun rose over the valley, painting everything gold, the three of them would wake together and begin another day. Not perfect, not easy, but theirs. The months turned into years. The ranch prospered under Caleb and Eliza's combined efforts. The garden grew lush and productive. Noah grew tall and strong, his laughter a constant presence in their lives. Eliza started teaching him more formally, using books she ordered from back east. Other families in the area heard about it and asked if their children could join. Before long, 3 mornings a week, the Hart Ranch became a small schoolhouse, with 5 children sitting around the kitchen table learning reading and arithmetic and history. Caleb built a small addition to the house, a real classroom with desks and a chalkboard. The town council voted to pay Eliza a small salary for her teaching, officially making her Brewster's first school teacher. She accepted with pride. 2 years after the wedding, on a spring morning when the valley was covered in wildflowers, Eliza discovered she was pregnant. She told Caleb that evening, after Noah had gone to bed. He stared at her for a long moment, then pulled her into his arms and held her so tight she could barely breathe. Are you happy? She whispered. I didn't think I could be this happy, he said, his voice thick. I didn't think I deserved it. You do, she said firmly. We both do. Noah was ecstatic when they told him. He immediately began planning everything the baby would need, drawing pictures of cribs and toys and making lists of names. What if it's a girl? He asked one evening. Then she'll be loved, Eliza said. What if it's a boy? Also loved, Noah grinned. I hope it's both. Twins would be great. Caleb laughed, a sound that had become more common over the years but never lost its power to make Eliza's heart sing. The baby came in early winter, during the first snowstorm of the season. It was a difficult birth, long and painful, but when Eliza finally held her daughter, small and perfect and screaming with fierce determination, she thought her heart might burst. They named her Sarah, after Caleb's first wife. It was Eliza's idea, and when she suggested it, Caleb had cried. Noah held his baby sister with such careful reverence that Eliza had to take a picture with the camera they'd borrowed from town, wanting to preserve that moment forever. She's so small, Noah whispered. You were too once, Caleb said. Was I this loud? Louder. Eliza laughed, exhausted and exhilarated and more complete than she'd ever imagined possible. That night, with baby Sarah asleep in her cradle and Noah finally convinced to go to bed, Caleb and Eliza sat together in their room. Do you ever think about that day at the train station? Caleb asked. When you first arrived? Sometimes. Do you regret it? Any of it? Eliza looked at him. At the man who'd learned to love again, who'd learned to fight, who'd become the partner she'd always needed. Not a single moment, she said. He kissed her forehead. Neither do I. Years continued to pass. Noah grew into a thoughtful young man who loved the ranch but also loved books and learning. When he was 16, he told Caleb and Eliza that he wanted to go to college, to study law, so he could come back and help people like Garrett had helped them. They were proud beyond words. Sarah grew into a spirited child who could outride most of the boys in town and had her mother's fierce determination and her father's quiet strength. The school expanded. More families moved to the area, drawn by stories of good land and a community that valued education. Eliza hired an assistant teacher, a young woman from Denver who'd answered a matrimonial advertisement of her own and found happiness in Brewster. The ranch prospered. Caleb bought more land, built a larger barn, acquired a small herd of cattle. He and Eliza worked as true partners, making decisions together, building something that would last beyond their own lifetimes. And on quiet evenings, when the work was done and the children were settled, they would sit on the porch together, watching the sun set over the valley. And remember a letter written in secret by a desperate boy. Remember a woman who refused to run when running would have been easier. Remember the choice to fight instead of surrender. Remember the moment when convenience became commitment and commitment became love. One evening, many years after that first meeting at the train station, Eliza found an old letter tucked into a book she was reading. It was the original letter Noah had written, the one that had brought her to Wyoming. She read it again, seeing the careful handwriting, the earnest words, the hope of a child who'd wanted nothing more than to make his father smile again. Caleb came up behind her, reading over her shoulder. "He saved us both," Eliza said quietly. "He did." Caleb wrapped his arms around her. "But you're the one who stayed. You gave me a reason to." They stood together, holding each other, holding the letter that had changed everything. Downstairs, Sarah was practicing her letters at the kitchen table, tongue caught between her teeth in concentration. Noah was home from college for the summer, helping his father repair a section of fence damaged in the last storm. The house was full of noise and life and love. And in that moment, Eliza understood what she'd been searching for all those years ago when she'd answered a matrimonial advertisement from a man she'd never met. Not safety, not security, not even happiness, exactly, but belonging. The deep bone certain knowledge that she was exactly where she was meant to be, with exactly the people she was meant to be with, living exactly the life she was meant to live. It hadn't been easy. It hadn't been simple. It certainly hadn't been what she'd expected, but it was hers, and that made all the difference. As the sun set over the valley, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Eliza folded the letter carefully and put it back in the book. Someday she'd give it to Noah, so he'd know how much his courage had mattered. So he'd understand that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is ask for help, even when we don't know if anyone will answer. But for now, she just held on to Caleb and watched the light fade and felt grateful for every hard, beautiful moment that had led her here. To this house, this family, this life. Home.